Before we begin talking about individual foods, it's important to understand something that, well, many people today have forgotten. During the Second World War, ordinary families didn't think of food as something that would always be available. They understood that supply chains were fragile, transportation could be interrupted, and, imports could vanish overnight. Food was treated as a form of insurance. Every sack of flour, every jar of preserved meat, every tin of powdered milk represented security. If you grew up hearing stories from parents or grandparents who lived through rationing, you know this mindset. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. When shortages came, people who had prepared quietly at home survived with far less stress than those who depended entirely on shops. That same lesson applies today. The foods that kept families alive in the 1940s are still available, still affordable, and still practical to store if you know what to look for. How powdered and dehydrated staples became the backbone of wartime kitchens. One of the most important categories of wartime stockpiling food was powdered and dehydrated products. Fresh milk was unreliable in many regions, so powdered milk became essential. It could be stored for years in sealed containers, transported easily, and reconstituted with water when needed. Families used it for drinking, baking, and cooking. Dried eggs served a similar purpose. These were widely used in military and civilian kitchens. When mixed with water, they functioned like fresh eggs in most recipes. While dried eggs are less common today, powdered whole eggs and egg substitutes are still available and store well when kept cool and dry. Dehydrated vegetables were also common. Carrots, onions, potatoes, cabbage and peas were sliced thin and dried either commercially or at home. These could be rehydrated for soups and stews. If you own a modern dehydrator, you can replicate this easily by drying surplus garden produce and sealing it in vacuum bags or glass jars with oxygen absorbers. Now, let's talk about why hard grains and legumes formed the foundation of long-term storage. Grains and beans were really the true workhorses of wartime stockpiles, Wheat berries, cornmeal, oats, barley, lentils and dried peas were all inexpensive, calorie-dense and extremely durable when stored properly. Many families kept these in metal bins, cloth sacks or sealed crocks, just to make sure nothing spoiled. Whole grains lasted much longer than flour because, their natural oils remained protected inside the kernel. Families often ground small amounts as needed using hand mills. These days, manual grain mills are still readily available and can turn stored wheat or corn into usable flour in just a few minutes. Beans were equally important, of course. Navy beans, kidney beans, split peas and lentils provided protein when meat was scarce. Properly dried beans can last decades if kept away from moisture and pests. A simple method today is to store them in food-grade buckets with mylar liners and oxygen absorbers. Preserved meats provided protein when fresh supplies disappeared, which was often the case. Fresh meat was actually one of the first things to become scarce during wartime. To compensate, families relied heavily on preserved meats. Salt pork, corned beef, canned beef, Spam-style luncheon meats, dried beef and pemmican were all pretty common back then. Salt curing was especially important. Pork or beef was packed in salt and kept in cool storage, preventing bacterial growth. While, this technique requires careful handling, it is still practiced today by traditional food preservers. Pressure canned meat was another cornerstone. Families canned chicken, rabbit, venison and beef in glass jars using pressure cookers. When stored in dark, cool cellars, these jars remained edible for years. Modern pressure canners allow you to safely preserve meat using the same principles. Why wartime households depended on fats and sugars for energy storage. Many people underestimate how critical fats and sugars were during WWII. Butter, lard, tallow and margarine were carefully rationed and stored because, fat provides dense energy and improves morale through cooking. Rendered animal fats, when purified and stored in sealed containers, can last years. Lard and tallow were used for frying, baking and even candle making. Sugar, honey and molasses were equally important. These never truly spoil when kept dry and sealed. Honey in particular can last indefinitely. Families use sugar not only for flavour but for food preservation through jams, jellies and syrups. Stockpiling these today is, simple enough. Store sugar in airtight containers, keep honey in glass jars, and, rotate cooking fats every few years. How root cellars and cool storage extended food life without electricity is really quite something. Before freezers were widespread, root cellars were absolutely essential. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, onions, apples and cabbages were all stored in cool, dark, humid spaces underground. And proper ventilation, of course, prevented mould and rot. If you have a basement, garage, or even a shaded outdoor shed, you can, replicate this system. Store root vegetables in crates filled with sand or sawdust. Try to keep temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit whenever possible. This, honestly, can extend storage life by months. Now, let's talk about how modern families can rebuild a WWII-style stockpile step by step. Rebuilding a wartime-style food reserve does not require panic buying or, expensive survival products. Just start small and build steadily. Begin with dry staples. Purchase extra rice, beans, oats, wheat berries and pasta. Store them in sealed containers. Next, add powdered milk, canned meats and dehydrated vegetables. Learn to rotate supplies by using older items first and replacing them. Invest in basic tools. A manual grain mill, pressure canner and dehydrator dramatically expand what you can store. Learn one preservation skill at a time. Start with drying apples or canning chicken, then gradually expand. Keep a written inventory. Wartime families knew exactly what they had. This prevented waste and ensured balance between carbohydrates, protein and fats. Why forgotten food wisdom still matters in an uncertain world. The people who lived through World War II did not prepare because they were afraid. They prepared because they were responsible. They understood that food security meant independence. It meant peace of mind. It meant the ability to care for family and neighbours when systems failed. That wisdom has not expired. In a world of fragile supply chains and rising costs, the old methods remain some of the most reliable tools we have. By rebuilding these stockpiles slowly and thoughtfully, you are not retreating into the past. You are preserving knowledge that has already proven its value under the hardest conditions imaginable. If you found this guide helpful, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into wartime survival, traditional skills, and practical history. Share this video with anyone who values self-reliance and preparedness. These lessons are worth passing on.